Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here live on the Cover One YouTube channel each and every Monday night, or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. It has been some time since I've been able to say those words. I've said those words exactly hundreds of times, several thousands of times even. And no, I haven't been on the Cover One Roundup in weeks. I had what the kids are calling, David, long COVID.
It sounded terrible because, he'll be back next week. He'll be fine. Then you were out another week. I was like, it's going to go the full 2 weeks, I guess. And then it went for a third week. And then I was starting to get concerned for your health. Not that I ever vocalized that to you necessarily. Just know that I was thinking about you.
I appreciate that. No, it was bad. It was like the sore throat just said sayonara like a couple of days ago. It was awful, but I survived, hopefully, unless it comes back, for round 2. But no, I should be good. But I'm back to talk about the Buffalo Bills. I still have not talked about that divisional round loss to the Cincinnati Bengals.
And you know what? We don't have to. Enough has been said about that.
That's the beauty of it. I haven't even appeared on a camera since then. I have not even as much as had a photo taken of myself, so I could save my takes for the Cover One Roundup, but you're not getting those today. What you are getting today is a Senior Bowl wrap-up. David spent last week down there in beautiful Mobile, Alabama, and he was rubbing shoulders with stars, or at least with Brandon Beane, kind of illegally, as you'll get into, I'm sure. But David was down there with a bunch of scouts, executives, and just analysts alike to get a look at this year's crop of, or at least some of the crop of this year's draft eligible talent. So what we're going to do today is go through position by position, sans quarterback, because I'm not going to waste time talking about quarterbacks when the Bills have Josh Allen. But we're going to go through position by position. David is going to talk about players that stuck out to him, maybe a few that kind of disappointed him. And then at the end, we will identify players that we think, or at least David thinks, could be fits for the Buffalo Bills, and he will tell you guys one player who he thinks the Bills need to draft that he saw at the Senior Bowl. And then also we're going to do True or Rubbish, because that's what everyone comes here for.
That's right.
So, David, how are you?
Kyle, let me tell you something. Last week was a phenomenal week for me. Despite being thoroughly sunburned after the first day of practice. That it was truly the only day where the sun was out the entire day, and I got absolutely cooked. In fact, on this side, you can still see the white line where my sunglasses are. Yeah, that was almost a week ago now. Almost, it's still it was not good. I believe on Twitter, someone posted a picture of a bunch of us, and somebody commented on Greg and said, is Greg scouting players from the sun?
True.
Which was a fair question to ask.
Fair question,
honestly. No, it was a great week. Being able to go there, to see these guys in practice, to be able to get on the field and talk to a couple of them, and of course, one day we showed up early. In fact, we showed up so early that security wasn't even there, so we just walked onto the field. I say we. Hold on, we allegedly walked onto the field.
Yeah.
And we were down there for a while. Practice then started. We kind of split up to the different areas we wanted to go to. Some people went to the DBs. Allegedly, others went to the running backs or whatever. I went to the offensive line, which was kind of my focus the entire week. And at a certain point, security may have allegedly asked some of us to allegedly leave and get back into the stands where we belonged. I was not one of those people, allegedly. So I was right there next to that. At a certain point, I was like, "Oh, there's Brandon Beane. I'm just gonna hang out next to Brandon Beane." Allegedly, we're not really sure if I was even there or if that was even Brandon Beane. Yeah. Who is to say? Truly, who is to say? Maybe the clicky Bills media is who's to say whether or not I was or was not there. Anyway, so I was down there and I hung out there. Unfortunately, even though security could not allegedly take me off the field, my bladder could not hold up. So I had to go back into the stands and use the bathroom.
Betrayed by the bladder. That's rough. I do have 2 questions for you, David.
Of course.
So one, well, besides all the football stuff that we'll get into later, but one, you floated the idea publicly. You floated the idea of taking a detour to go to Buc-ee's. Was that detour taken?
It was not, unfortunately. And I really want to. First of all, so there was a Buc-ee's in Florida that I could have diverted to. It was like an hour and a half out of my way though, and it's already a 9-hour drive. So right. I didn't really want to do that. But there was another Buc-ee's in Alabama that I could have gone to. But I was also meeting some old friends of mine in Gainesville, and that was about 5.5 hours plus the extra hour because it's switching from Central Time to East Coast Time. I was just like, I'd like to, because I have been to Buc-ee's only once, and I really want that beef jerky again. But I was just like, nope, I just got to power through. Just gotta keep going.
I've never been to Buc-ee's. I must go. And
it is an experience, and I can honestly, genuinely say, not overhyped.
That's all I wanted to hear. That's genuinely the best thing you could have said about it. Is it's an experience. I'm at the point in my life where I just want experiences. And speaking of experiences, the Waffle House. The Waffle House is my favorite establishment in the world. And it wasn't like, look, I'm not gonna lie. I like you guys, right? I like the Cover One people. I like football to an extent. But when the possibility of going to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl was brought up, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to go to Alabama for this. And then it wasn't until you guys were there that I was like, oh my God, that is Alabama. They're going to have Waffle Houses up the wazoo. I could be eating at Waffle House 3 times a day, theoretically. Did you guys eat at Waffle House?
Kyle, we did not eat at Waffle House because the first day that we were there, right after we picked up our credentials, we went to a local restaurant called the Ruby Slipper, and we all sat and looked at, and we all had the same thought, which was, there's absolutely no way I'm going to eat at this place only one time. There's like 5 different things on this menu that I need to try. And not only did we eat, we ate at the Ruby Slipper. Strong recommend, by the way, to anyone in Mobile. Great breakfast food. Unbelievable food. Not only did we eat there every single day for breakfast, Brian Daboll and Shea Tierney also ate there every single day for breakfast. And the very first day, Brian Daboll had a lot of trouble trying to figure out if the door was a push or a pull.
Are we questioning the competence of the New York Giants head
Absolutely
coach?
Not, because Brian Daboll, who we actually talked to quite a bit, one of the most genuine and personable people I've ever met in my life.
He's a Buffalo guy.
It just like he talked to like Eric and Anthony and someone else who was there that I can't remember. Oh, right. Shoot, now I lost it again. Anyway, he talked to Greg. Of course, God, now I feel bad.
Wow, it took that long for Greg?
I feel bad.
Wow. Would have been a great time to say.
We just talked to them about like, hey, where'd you guys grow up in Buffalo? You know, blah blah blah. It was a good time, very good time. We also saw him and Shea Tierney later on that first night, just smoking stogies as they do.
Yeah, right, nice. Exactly. I love Brian Daboll so
love Brian Daboll. What a great guy.
But no, it's funny because you were complaining about you weren't complaining. You were voicing genuine concern about your sunburn. And I was like, David, I haven't seen the sun in 40 days. Okay. I feel no sympathy. It's funny because like the next day the sun was out in beautiful Buffalo, New York, but it was like 4 degrees with like negative 20-degree wind chill. So joke was on me yet again. And it was on me again today when we got an earthquake, and I was awoken at 6:30 in the morning.
That is true.
By rattling. I live in a 2-story house. I'm going to dox myself. I live in a 2-story house. I was sleeping. I sleep on the second floor. And so my fucking bedroom is rattling and shaking. And then, like, sleeping Kyle or just awake Kyle, I justify it with, like, oh, it's something upstairs. And then, like, 10 minutes pass. I don't fall back asleep. And I'm like, wait a minute. I am upstairs. That couldn't have been something above me. And then I checked Twitter and everyone's tweeting about earthquake. And I was like, oh, shit, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot of talk about nothing. This show and Cover One in general are brought to you by a number of sponsors, one of them being BetUS. And we will hear about them right now from our friend. Oh, what's his name? David, what's his name? You just remembered it.
You know what? I don't need this, Kyle. I don't need it. I really don't.
It's Greg.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500 or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
BetUS, again, promo code COVER1. And speaking of promo code COVER1, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. David, can you tell us a little bit about Underdog?
I would love to tell everyone about our favorite fantasy website, Underdog Fantasy. We are now in the Super Bowl. We've now reached the pinnacle of professional football. It is unfortunately the Chiefs and the Eagles. But if you have a dog, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in the race here, you might be able to bet on whether or not someone like A.J. Brown has like 5 catches and 100 yards, or if Devontae Smith goes off, or if Patrick Mahomes does Patrick Mahomes types of things. That sort of stuff. You can put up to 5 different over-unders correctly, and you can win 20 times your original money. If you use promo code COVER1, that's the number 1, when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is 100 free US dollars in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Even with inflation, that is a bargain deal. Sign up today and start winning today.
Thank you, Underdog and BetUS. Okay. We made like Terry Pagula and paid the bills. Okay, so I love that joke. I'm going to take that joke every time I can. We are going to get into the Senior Bowl here in just a moment. But before I do that, before we get into that, I want to tease next week's episode. Something big happened, David. So last week, I shouldn't even say last week. It was this weekend. I was doing my weekly it is weekly. My weekly illegal trespass of One Bills Drive.
Of course.
As one does. Exactly. As one does, right? I'm a journalist, big J journalist. That's what all the journalists do, right? They just kind of snoop around. So I found something. Are you ready for this, David?
I'm always ready to see what you've uncovered this week.
I found the script. Buffalo Bills 2023 off-season script by Brandon Beane and Roger Goodell. I found the script, and next week we are leaking. That you didn't see that. Next week we are leaking the script. Okay,
Kyle.
Next week,
Kyle. You see, unfortunately, you've kind of screwed yourself because we all know that's fake, and we know it's fake because it would obviously be written by Roger Goodell and Terry and Kim Pagula, the owners, since they're the ones who are in control of everything, not the general manager, not the football guys.
Oh, right. No. So I made a fake script, but I actually did find the real one. And
of course.
And next week we're leaking that one. Next week we leak the Buffalo Bills off-season script post Super Bowl. Okay.
Gotcha.
David, are you ready to talk about some football?
I am ready.
So, beautiful Mobile, Alabama. I'm sure, the people were going crazy down there in beautiful Mobile, watching some football, and the position groups. How was it divided? Just what was the structure of the Senior Bowl for someone who wasn't there?
The strongest groups were probably the O-line and the defensive backs, which is kind of the case for this whole draft. It seems like there's a lot of corners in this draft. There's a lot of like really solid offensive line prospects. Wide receiver was fine. There were a couple of interesting standouts. Running backs, like there were some names there that unfortunately kind of disappointed a bit. Defensive line, a couple of guys, but not like a bunch, no major stand. Just one guy worth watching, but it was largely concentrated on the defensive backs and the offensive line.
Roy Collins writes, "This is a football show. Sometimes,
surprisingly, yes.
Sometimes, yeah. When we want to talk about football, yeah, we it's
the off season. Don't judge me.
I know, right? Well, back at it again with visual bits on a podcast. I love it. All right, so David, we're going to start with the running backs here. This was a position group that someone who, me, on Twitter, just, following along, hashtag Cover One Senior Bowl. I did not, or in just regular Senior Bowl coverage in general, I did not see the running backs getting a whole lot of love throughout the week. Were there anyone, or were there any players who really stood out to you in this group?
So there were two guys in particular that I was interested in, right? One was Evan Hull from Northwestern, who looks pretty solid as a player, but man, I mean, he wasn't the only one. Pretty much everyone struggled in this area, but they all struggled as pass protectors. I mean, they were getting worked all as pass protectors, and it wasn't even close most of the time. Evan Hull, on the whole, looked fine, looks pretty solid, has some juice, can bring some of that, a little bit of power, which I think is kind of what the Bills would like to have. Moving from like James Cook and Nyheim Hines, obviously, I think both of them are on this team in 2023, but you need something else to replace Singletary, assuming he walks, which he probably will. And you need some sort of power element. I think Evan Hull can bring that. I will say I think Evan Hull is a bit like he's a one speed type of runner. There's not a ton of like deceleration and quick movements, which is sort of what Devin Singletary was able to bring, even though Devin Singletary did not have that like great breakaway speed. So there's him, and then there's Chase Brown from Illinois. Chase Brown, I mean, you look at him, he looked physical standpoint to play running back in the NFL. Unfortunately, he also struggled in pass protection. He struggled with a fumble during one of the team periods. He struggled with catching the ball consistently in receiving drills. He looks like a guy. He's a guy that you want to like, just based on the way he's built and based on the way I assume he will test at the combine. But there's also lot of inconsistencies just sort of throughout the whole week. And it was a little disappointing because when you first see him, you're like, oh, this guy's about to show something. And it was just like, I need to see more. I need to see a little bit more from you, man.
So is my assessment correct in that generally speaking, the running backs kind of left a little bit to be desired this year?
Yeah. I mean, there was obviously some talent with the guys that were there, but there was a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of issues with just like not being able to complete plays at the way that they wanted to. Obviously, pass protecting, which is such a critical piece if you want to be a consistent NFL running back these days. It was just lacking, and it's clear that there are some talented guys, but they've got some work to do.
So obviously there are more draft eligible running backs than just those who are in attendance at the Senior Bowl. But is it fair to say that out of Evan Hull, Chase Brown, all the guys in the Senior Bowl, all the running backs at the Senior Bowl, you are not pounding the table for any of them?
I'm not pounding the table for any of them, no. I think that there are, if they end up taking someone like an Evan Hull or Chase Brown, so be it. That's fine. Part of that would depend on when they take them, right? But overall, nothing's really moving the needle too much for me at the moment.
Speaking of disappointing, we're moving to the wide receiver position. There's one player that I want to talk about here.
All right, go ahead.
Because there's a dude who I was seeing getting some pre-draft or some pre-Senior Bowl love on Twitter and on social media in general. That's Princeton wide receiver Andre Yosavis. I think that's how you pronounce it. I looked it up. I think that's how you pronounce it. I was gonna say dude's a quirked up white boy with a little bit of swag, but I think he's Hawaiian, so that's a little bit inaccurate. But again, played at Princeton. Dude is literally a track star, has track star speed, and people were kind of interested to see how the guy, the Ivy League track star, how would he do when put up against like actual football players, if you will, or like dudes who won't be accountants next year. And from what I've heard, or from what I read, what I watched, he kind of left a lot to be desired in terms of creating separation and stuff like that. So, David, before we get into the rest of the receivers here, Andre Yosavis, what was your takeaways from him?
I felt like he was fine. Wasn't necessarily the biggest standout in the wide receiver group. But I felt like if you liked him going into this week, you probably left feeling largely the same, maybe a little disappointed overall, but I thought he played pretty well throughout the practice periods throughout the week. I think that wherever he was probably slotted, I'm guessing he was probably a late day 2, probably a day 3 pick. That's pretty much what he looked like to me.
So it wasn't as bad as I read.
It wasn't as bad. No. I thought he was fine. Not like overly impressive, but not like, dreadful and disappointing. At least I didn't think so. Although, to be fair, I did not necessarily focus on the wide receiver group a whole lot this past week. So take that for what you will.
Well, then this isn't a good question to segue to, but what wide receivers did stick out to you from what you were able to watch?
So there were a couple. Michael Wilson from Stanford. I mean, he's somebody that has had a bit of issues in the past in terms of injuries. Hasn't had a ton of opportunities at Stanford, but he really showed out this week. He was pretty impressive being able to separate. He was, pretty consistent catching the ball. He had one drop in one of the red zone periods, unfortunately. But he was pretty impressive throughout the whole week. Another guy that was really good the whole week, probably ended up being the guy who made himself the most money, was Michigan State wide receiver Jayden Reed. And Jayden Reed is interesting because he's probably about 5'10", in the 190s weight-wise, so not like big necessarily, probably going to be more of a slot guy. But if you watch Michigan State on tape, their offense was largely, hitches, it was curls, it was comebacks, it was slants, these are easiest routes to get yourself open with, right? Like you're not the offense was not necessarily doing Jayden Reed a ton of favors, especially given that he played on the boundary, but he made a lot of contested catches. He's a really solid route runner, really solid hands, can go up and win those contested catch scenarios. And given his size, I think that you put him in the slot, you have a really unique weapon who can win in contested scenarios, but also if you scheme him open, he's going to be open because of the way that he runs routes. And not only that, but he's a very solid punt returner. And while the Bills don't necessarily have that need at the moment, given that they have Nyheim Hines, a genuinely really, really good future prospect. And if he tests well at the combine, I think you're going to see him go from middle early day to potentially day 3 to late day 2 type of guy.
Very interesting. That is a prospect that I had not heard of yet. See,
He's a good player. He's a good player.
Is he potentially a Bills fit? The slot is kind of up in the air right now.
That is an important question because we don't really know what the Bills want to do with the slot position. Obviously, they felt like they didn't get what they wanted because they wanted Isaiah McKenzie to be the guy. They weren't ready to make Khalil Shakir the guy. They tried Jamison Crowder before he got hurt. They brought in Cole Beasley because they were just getting desperate for any sort of production from that spot. I don't think McKenzie, Beasley, or Crowder are on this team in 2023. So that kind of leaves you with Khalil Shakir, and maybe he's the guy. Maybe they do feel confident enough in him moving into year 2 with him. But it would not surprise me if they also drafted a receiver. I think Jaden Reed could be a fit for them, but we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if he. I would be very excited if he were, because I think he's a very good player and will be a good pro, but very much a we'll see type of guy. In terms of other players who really impressed this week, and actually, Ole Miss receiver Jonathan Mingo, who had a rough first day, came back in the next couple of days of practice and really performed well. In fact, our intern, quick aside, our intern AJ Cebulski got quite the runaround just getting to Mobile.
So I've heard.
He had a flight. He had like a 3-hour layover in Charlotte. Got on his flight and then got diverted to Birmingham, which Greg, our wonderful friend of the podcast, mentioned to us while we were trying to help AJ get to Mobile, was like, I have flown a lot in the last 20 years. I don't think I have ever heard of a plane actually being diverted to another city because of fog. That's something that happens in rom-coms to try and generate some tension at the very end, is he really gonna get there in time to stop the wedding or something, But
AJ got plot devised.
He did. He got stranded in Birmingham because Birmingham's 5 hours away from Mobile, and there were no rental cars, there were no buses, there were no trains, there was nothing. So he had to have a hotel voucher. It was just such a mess. But all that's to say, when AJ did get there, and he did eventually get there, God bless him, he did great work all week. One of the best things that interview with Jonathan Mingo, and if nobody's looked at that, go to his Twitter page. Look for that interview with Mingo, because he basically said after that first day, I knew who I was going up against, so I started looking at film on these guys just so I could figure out how to beat them. I was like, heck yeah, dude, that's what you want to see. Just
in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, that's the type of competitive nature I want to see, man. That's good stuff. That was just great, because sometimes you have that bad first day of practice, and that's basically your omen of all right, well, that's it. That's kind of just who we think he's going to be this week. He came back. He was awesome. He was fantastic. He did a great job all week after that rough first day. So a shout out to Jonathan Mingo. I don't know if he's necessarily a Bills guy, but that would be really interesting. I think he, at the very least, he definitely, I think, brought good attention to himself to be able to, just bounce back after that first day, and the way that he did, the way he went about it, that again, we talk about good process, right? And often good process means good results. And that was absolutely the case for Jonathan Mingo this week.
And Ole Miss has been a bit of a receiver factory in recent years. So, hey, that's a name to check out, or to watch, I should say. Also, check out cover1.football. AJ has been putting out scouting reports from his interviews at the Senior Bowl, or just spotlights, really, more so than scouting reports. But yeah, he had one on Jonathan Mingo. Also had one on Xavier Hutchinson, Iowa State receiver. Anything from him?
I'll be honest, I don't remember anything from Xavier Hutchinson at the Senior Bowl.
Doing great.
I was very focused on that offensive line.
Well, let's transition. Okay, we'll transition there in a second. But like names here, I guess, just to move forward to the next round, or to the final segment where you need to pick one who you want them to draft. Michael Wilson and Jaden Reed, are those the names that are progressing here that you think could be potential fits for the Bills?
Those are the guys that I would be most interested in. I would be fine with Andre Isavis, but he's not necessarily like pushing the needle for me. I think someone like Michael Wilson has a lot of potential. I think Jaden can play in the slot and provide punt return and kick return abilities. Yeah, those would be the two guys I'm most interested in.
Let's segue now into the position group that you spent the most time on, the offensive line. I don't know if you want to start with this dude here who we have at the top of the outline, but all right, yeah, this is the guy that maybe besides Michael Wilson, this is the dude who got the most love that I saw on Twitter out of the Senior Bowl, and that's John Michael Schmitz. So, David, what'd you see from him?
So John Michael Schmitz is officially one of Eric's guys for this year, and for good reason, because that dude competed his ass off the entire week. And like I was largely focusing on like tackles and guards, wasn't necessarily looking at a lot of the centers, but this dude was just like, it was hard to not notice him just because of the way that he was hitting and competing and pushing and just like locking up some of these dudes. It was impressive stuff. Just has that ability to really lock up with any dude that you put him against. And I think that there's questions because he's a center, like, well, does that mean you get rid of Mitch Morse? I don't think that's really the case. I don't see any point of getting rid of Mitch Morse at this point, because then you're just creating another hole that you need to fill, and you don't want to fill that with a rookie. It just doesn't really make any sense. However, if we go back a little bit to the Eric Wood days when he got drafted from Louisville, started off as a guard for the first couple of years while Jeff Handgartner, if anyone remembers that name.
My favorite, yeah.
Was the starting center for the Bills during that time. It wasn't until 2011 when Eric Wood became the full-time starting center. I think you could see a very realistic scenario where that's a very similar path for John Michael Schmitz if the Bills decide to take him. I think he's a really, really interesting and solid prospect. I'll be very interested in seeing how he tests at the combine. But I think he's got that thing that you want to see in offensive lineman, that toughness, that aggression, that I think you want not only just want to see an offensive lineman, but I think it's something that this offensive line is desperately missing. I think to come in and just be that bully type. And I think John Michael Schmitz can definitely be that type of guy.
I think you're omitting the most important part when it comes to the Buffalo Bills.
Which is?
John Michael Schmitz is a wrestler.
That's a very good point. He's
Former wrestler.
Former wrestler. That is a big McDermott thing. So
huge McDermott thing. Huge offensive lineman thing in general. But
for sure.
Yeah. I love that blueprint, right? And like I love the idea of a John Michael Schmitz like in round 2. I don't know if they're going to be in position to get him in round 2, but like that idea in theory is so good because you're killing two birds with one stone, right? Because you are replacing Pro Bowl guard Roger Saffold next year. Look, I think it's probably fair to say that John Michael Schmitz would be probably a plug and play player next year. So you get a starter on your line next year at guard, and then when Mitch Morse ultimately retires, which we'll see what happens, right? The concussions are piling up. But just age, contract, whatever. When the Bills ultimately do decide to move on from Mitch Morse, whenever that may be, you have your center of the future right there. Like you said, the Eric Wood blueprint. You can transition him, and then you fill guard in however you can. So I really like the idea of that. I think that is a very interesting and intriguing idea. And again, there's a blueprint that it works. But that's not the only offensive lineman that you watch.
It's not. It's actually probably the biggest part of this list. So we're going to try and move as quickly as possible.
Yeah, break down your guys here.
So I actually ended up being able to interview, and I was very happy to be able to do that because the second guy, Matt Bergeron from Syracuse, who some people in this who are Bills fans might be Syracuse fans. He he was great. He was great this week. There were some people who said that he would. I think Eric actually talked with Paul Alexander, often like trainer for offensive line prospects, currently working with Matt Bergeron. He said that that Bergeron's the best offensive lineman that's here. Which, you know, when you're working with someone, when you're training with someone, that's a nice thing to be able to say, I guess. But I mean, Bergeron was really great this week. He's played left tackle. He's played right tackle. I actually had the chance to interview him. His family was there. His family is from Canada. They flew all the way down
Bergeron,
to
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, right. They flew all the way down from Canada just to watch him practice in Mobile, Alabama. And they were there the whole week. They weren't there just for like a day or two. They were there the whole week. He was a great interview. He was very easy to talk to. He said he didn't really care, you know, left side or right side. Well, actually, no, he did care. He said he felt more comfortable on the left side at left tackle. Okay. I do think that NFL teams are a little more are a little more concerned about like his footwork. He got pushed into to get some reps there. I thought he looked super good at guard. Like he looked okay at tackle. He looked good at tackle. He looked like just sort of like against like super quick, like bendy type of guys. He might struggle in the NFL level against those types of guys, but if you put him at guard, yeah, I think you really got something there. I think you really have something with Matt Bergeron in there. There was one Canadian scout that I talked to who's in his opinion said that Bergeron was like a top 15 lock, which I would be a little surprised with. But you know, in this particular class where there's not necessarily a ton of top end talent, maybe someone in the top 15. But again, a top 15 pick for a guard, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. He's definitely on my radar, that's for sure. Another guy that I thought was super interesting was Wanye Morris or Wanye. It is Wanye. Wanye Morris from Oklahoma. He started off as a 5-star recruit, went to the University of Tennessee, started at left tackle there as a true freshman, transferred out, went to Oklahoma, has played, you know, because of that in like 3 different offenses in his time in college. But what really stood out with me was just his super unique movement skills. He is not somebody who lumbers. He's not somebody who, you know, everything just looks like stiff or like he's fighting himself. He moves super well. He looks like he has a like impressive control of his body for someone of his size. Just he's going to be one of those sort of height, weight, speed guys. He is somebody that I think is going to, like, a lot of where he ends up getting drafted is going to depend on his athletic testing. Like for some of these guys, it might boost you up a little bit, might bring you down a little bit. For him, I think it's going to kind of the main thing for him, where if he really tests well, I guarantee there's going to be people who bang the table for this guy because I think he's coachable. I think that he improved with. At first, you saw him struggle a little bit, but then he was able to win more reps more consistently. He's got a great aggressive demeanor that you want to see. I think this is somebody that, if he goes to the right spot, could really turn into something like genuinely good. He's somebody else that I'd want to see a little bit on the inside. I don't think he really got a lot of run on the inside. I think part of that is just because he looked so comfortable and capable in space. You don't want to take somebody who's that comfortable in space and put them on the inside necessarily. So I would love to see him. I think he's got the potential to be a really good right tackle. He is somebody that I'm interested in. I don't know if he's necessarily a Bills type of player, but I'm very interested in seeing what happens with Wanye. Moving on. There is, strangely enough, not the biggest guy at the Senior Bowl, and that is O'Cyrus Torrence. O'Cyrus Torrence just to consult with my producer here real quick, he is about a shade under 6'5" and 340 pounds. He was also not the biggest person that was at the Senior Bowl this week. Osiris is a very large human being, very powerful. That was all very evident. He performed as expected, I think. I don't think he necessarily blew anyone out of the water, per se. But you could tell that this guy has like a first round type of pedigree. He's somebody that is going to be very interesting to watch moving forward. He looks like somebody that's actually lost weight. And it certainly looks like he's going to perform better because of it. As long as that weight kind of stays in that sort of 340 range, especially in the combine and moving forward, I think that'll be a good indicator to NFL teams. Like, all right, he can take himself seriously. He's going to commit to this. You know, he's somebody that can keep himself under control, and that won't necessarily be a hindrance for him moving forward. He's somebody that's definitely on, at the very least, Bills fans' radars. Because of his size and his strength, and obviously his ability to play in the interior. I would be very happy if they took someone like Osiris Torrance the first. That's somebody that I would definitely keep my eye on. And as far as the largest person at the Senior Bowl, that was Ohio State offensive tackle DeJuan Jones, who is 6'8", almost 360 pounds. Let me tell you something. He looks every bit of
weight
that.
on. Dude needs to put some weight on. Too skinny.
You don't fully understand. If you've never been around an NFL player or an NFL caliber type of player, you don't fully realize just how large and impressive some of those dudes are. Really, most of those dudes are. The fact that DeJuan Jones overshadowed them just in pure size alone was shocking to me. I mean, it was, look at this man. Look at this dude. Look at this absolute wall of a insane. Absolutely insane.
My God.
Now, unfortunately, he was he was someone who worked on the first day, had practice on the first day, sat out the rest of the week. Not really sure if it was injury or if he was just like, you know what? I showed what I needed to show. I'm done. I'm done for the rest of the week. Which, understandable because he kind of did. I will say he is a big lumbering. Oh my gosh. Could you imagine playing basketball against that dude?
Dude, this guy's driving you down in the post. Jesus.
My gosh.
No, thank you.
No. He's somebody that is definitely one of those big lumbering types. And honestly, like I guarantee the comparison for him throughout the draft process is going to be someone like Orlando Brown.
Absolutely.
Is probably fair. I think that I don't know if he's necessarily a Bills type of guy again, but that is not someone I would ever want to line up against. That is a terrifying looking human being. That is, oh man, I can't imagine having to play against someone like that, man. That is ridiculous. He was moving people though in that first day of practice. He was you could just tell the size and strength that he had was special. And if he again, one of those guys where if he goes to the right team, he can be like a star type of guy. Lastly, in terms of the offensive line, is University of Tennessee offensive tackle Darnell Wright. Thank you. Oh, now we're using visuals for everyone. All right, I'm good with that.
I figured it out.
There you go. Darnell Wright, really solid throughout the whole week of practice. Comes from obviously a very explosive offense. Josh Heupel. He's somebody that offense is kind of something that concerns me a little bit just because of how little it asks of the offensive line, because it's very quick passing. It's not a lot of like deep drops or deep sets or blocking for a whole lot of time in terms of pass protection. And obviously if you're going to be blocking for someone like Josh Allen, you're going to have to hold up for a little in pass protection. But he is I think a really solid run blocker. He's got the size, the strength, the length that you want. This is somebody that I think is probably going to be on the Bills' radar. We'll see kind of, if there's any smoke to be had throughout the draft season or surrounding the Bills and what they're interested in the offensive line. I would not be upset at all if they took someone like Darnell Wright at the end of the first round. So
I think I would be.
Yeah.
Not to discredit him as a player, which obviously you just talked about. I just don't. I don't know. I'm still not team offensive lineman in the first round, and I don't necessarily think. I mean, look, I have the script, right? So maybe I know something.
You do have the script.
Maybe I know something. I don't know. Like, it wouldn't shock me necessarily, right? Like, obviously, they could do it. Offensive line is a big need on this team, and I think they're going to have at least probably just two new starters, but they will have two new starters on the offensive line next year. My microphone fell. So we'll wait and see how those starters come in. But Spencer Brown we'll talk about Spencer Brown later. Spencer Brown probably is going to be one of those players who is not starting next year. But we'll get into that later. But look, I'm ranting now about wide receivers. I am just so tired of this approach of like, look, receiver classes are deep. So let's just take two on day 3 and maybe one of them will hit. Where it's like in the past, right? When you were Brandon Beane and you look at the receiving core that the Buffalo Bills have, and like, you had Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley was good, John Brown, right? Like you could afford to be like, okay, and we have tight ends, we have running backs. There's only so many targets to go around. We don't necessarily need to invest heavily into the wide receiver position. Sure. So like Gabe Davis in round 4 is the highest receiver Beane's ever taken. Fine, right? Like that's a swing you can take. And you could argue that it paid off, or that definitely did pay off. But just like the Bills are now in the position where they need offensive playmakers and they do not have the cap space, nor is it necessarily a good offensive playmaker free agency class, and they don't have the cap space to really pay anyone. They need to get talent for Josh Allen. And like if his, I guess, approach to that is, we'll take 2 guys on day 3 again. Like I don't like that. I don't necessarily love that. I think add elite talent at the end of round 1. Add like a Josh Downs.
I think that's fair, and I think there's part of me that's conflicted about, like, do you dip more into the free agent class for something like offensive line and just get someone that you're comfortable with as a veteran that you want to just have start right away or compete right away for a spot? Or do you dip more into the draft and say, like, all right, well, let's develop this guy. Let's see what we could do with this guy. Maybe he turns into something. But then you're not really getting guys for 2023, and you need offensive line help for 2023. Obviously, a lot of these questions are going to be answered after free agency, but even before we get to free agency, they got to figure out that whole cap situation because it's going to be tricky just to get under the cap and then give themselves some measure of money to work with. And I mean, Brandon Beane already said, like, there's probably not going to be any sort of big splashy free agent signing this year, which, is fine. They don't necessarily need some big. No, it would be kind of shocking if they landed some big trendy free agent pickup, which I don't even know who that would be this year. But there are guys in the offensive line that are available, both in free agency and especially in this draft. And I think it's important to, in my opinion, dip into both. I think to me, there's nothing wrong with having too much offensive line talent, not in today's NFL, and not when Josh Allen is your quarterback.
Absolutely. Well said. Let's transition now to the other side of the trenches, right? Another area in which the Bills arguably need to add talent at, especially when you saw what happened last year after Von Miller went down, just kind of production. So, tell us who stood out to you at the Senior Bowl on the defensive line.
Well, there were only a couple that really stood out, kind of for similar reasons. Well, I'll kind of briefly touch on both of them. So the first was, I will see if I can get this name right, Adetoyinma Adebawore. Adebawore.
This
Yeah,
is how it's
that guy.
spelled.
That guy from Northwestern. He definitely showed a lot of that energy, a lot of strength. I thought that he was again one of those guys who really competed his ass off. Look at the man. Look at that guy.
It's an old picture.
His own picture, but
He grew up.
just somebody that really competed all week. Was not afraid of going against any of these offensive line. Just a really, I think it could be a solid player. I'm not 100% sure what his like biggest strength is. I'm not sure what his. He seems like one of those guys who just wins largely off of that first step,
Okay.
sort of that quick, disruptive, penetrating type, which is not necessarily what the Bills need at the moment. And on the same vein, Keanu Benton was probably the most difficult guy to block for offensive linemen this week. But it was largely because he just had this one move that he perfected and made work. That's a
Look at this dude smile. Championship smile.
He is living life, breathing air, because somehow he just knew he was gonna get there.
It'd be so wonderful. I'm just gonna say Christian Wilkins. I'm getting Christian Wilkins vibes from this guy right now.
There were some people kind of comparing him to Christian Wilkins.
Hell yeah.
Honestly. I think that he wins largely off of quickness. I think that he's got the strength though. I do think that a lot of the people who were going against him in one-on-ones largely struggled because he just had this one move that he really worked really well. But after the first day or two, you saw not as many wins from Keanu Benton and more wins from the offensive lineman in one-on-ones. Still a good player. He's definitely going to need some work, though, as I think a lot of players in this draft. So,
when are you thinking in terms of like rounds for Keanu
Benton? That's a little tricky. If I'm just guessing, I would probably say he's kind of that mid to late day 2 type of guy, just because there's not a ton of depth and talent in this defensive line group from what I've seen or heard. It will be interesting to see exactly where the NFL values him, though. So we'll see.
I'm intrigued, especially given
just off of the vibes.
The vibes are immaculate, and that's why I'm intrigued mostly. But you look at just look at contracts, right? Ed Oliver, final year of his deal, and he's probably going to get paid, and we'll see how he factors into the Bills long term. And you heard Brandon Beane say maybe they need to see more in his contract year, so we'll have to wait and see what they do with Ed Oliver. Daquan Jones entering the final year of his deal. Jordan Phillips is a free agent. I think this is the last year of Tim Settle's deal. The defensive tackle position for the Buffalo Bills is not one that is that has much stability long term, if you will. Right. So defensive tackle is a position that I could see them addressing in this draft, addressing relatively early as well. So I'm intrigued. Good vibes there from Keanu Benton. If the Christian Wilkins draft, if that comp is one that's accurate, I mean, the Bills were very interested in Christian Wilkins in the 2019 draft. So. I mean, maybe that's a guy who they target. So let's move over to linebacker here, because the least surprising thing that I heard coming out of the Senior Bowl was that Cam Jones is a stud and that Cam Jones was making plays. What?
No, go ahead.
It's not surprising. I talked about Cam Jones months ago on this podcast, on the very same episode that I talked about Anthony Richardson and said he's the next Josh Allen, LOL. But on that podcast, you know, there's receipts. I said Cam Jones is one of my guys this year. And I mean, David, tell us about Cam Jones.
He was somebody that our Russ Brown, Radio Russ, interviewed. He was impressive all week. He was kind of one of those dudes that was just like from the get-go, ready to attack, and he played that way all week. Just a really, really solid dude who's going to bring that that physicality. Again, I don't know how interested the Bills are going to be in a with Tremaine Edmonds, unless Tremaine Edmonds gets just like an insane offer from some other team. I have to imagine the Bills are more interested in bringing Tremaine Edmonds back on a long-term deal. You have Matt Milano, obviously. Have who you drafted last year for some reason. So I can't imagine the Bills being interested in Cam Jones as a high draft pick, which I imagine he would be relatively. But he is a good player. Just plain and simple. Good player.
Great player. Yeah, no, again, it's sad, right? It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I see no, it's like kind of with Breece Hall last year where it was like, I see no way in which it would be acceptable for the Bills to pick this player, but I very much want this player. But like, if, again, like you said, the only scenario in which the Bills draft Cam Jones is if Tremaine Edmonds hits the open market and gets paid a lot of money, a sum that Brandon Beane is not comfortable matching, which that's going to be a high sum, I think. I think the Bills are going to do everything in their power to bring Tremaine Edmonds back. But if they don't, and they roll into next season with Cam Jones and Matt Milano as their linebacker duo, I'm not sad. I'm not necessarily sad about that. I'm sad that they lost Tremaine Edmonds, but if they replace him with Cam Jones, I'm like, okay, that's okay. And again, he's a Bills dude, right? Like 4-time team captain, like a dude who they obviously would have some interest in. Moving on to the DBs, I want to start with a guy who, again, AJ wrote a spotlight on, J.L. Skinner, Boise State safety. Who, again, just look at the frame, right? Dude's like 6'4", said he could play big nickel. What'd you see out of him?
He was somebody that flew under all week. I'm not 100% sure why. I mean, part of it is just because there were a lot of really good DBs this week. But J.L. Skinner is definitely somebody that I mean, just that frame, that build. I mean, he's somebody that could be kind of a later pick. I guarantee he's going to be somebody's, like a lot of people's kind of like sleeper DB pick, especially a corner where there's a lot of corners in this draft. I get the feeling he's going to be one of those sleeper picks for draft Twitter as a whole. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I thought he played fairly well throughout the week. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's got that size, man. He's got that length. Oh, look at this. Right there. Right there. Love it. Love seeing our work right there on the good old Google machine. Shout out to AJ, and of course, has become a subscriber today. $57 a year. You're muted, Kyle.
I've been muted the whole time.
You've been muted the whole time.
I was talking. Thank you for doing the ad read. What other DBs stood out to you?
So Tyreek Stevenson is super interesting to me, okay? Because he started at Georgia, and there were rumors that he left Georgia because they wanted him to play more nickel and sort of this sort of moving DB type role, which he wasn't all that interested in. So he transferred to Miami with Manny Diaz when he was still there.
Nice.
And I even asked him, like, because at a certain point in practice during the week, he ended up going into the slot position because of injuries. I asked him, like, do you have a preference, slot? No preference. I want to, there was an injury, somebody went down, I was the first one to go and put myself in there. So things change, obviously, and with the decisions you make as a freshman in college are a little different than the decisions you make as an adult. I don't know if that's the same for you, Kyle.
No, I still make bad decisions.
I didn't say bad decisions. I said similar decisions. Very different. I gave you the easy out, and you still didn't take it. All right.
Again, I make bad decisions. Did you expect anything else?
So with Tyreek Stevenson, I think he's another one of those guys who's going to test super well. I think he's got the experience that you want. I think he's got that inside-out flexibility that you want. he's somebody worth keeping an eye on, especially considering the fact that like the Bills are kind of in flux as it comes to like safety and whether or not that's something, whether or not that's the route they really want to go to. I don't know if that really is where they're going to end up going. I would be a little surprised if it was, but he is somebody that's interesting to me. So I'm intrigued by that for sure. The next guy.
Is this the quirked up white boy with a little bit of swag?
You bet it is, Kyle. Riley Moss, one of 2 DBs from Iowa. Both Iowa DBs, by the way. Fantastic all week. Riley Moss, like you said, white boy, was, of course, projected to move to safety, but they let him play at corner, and he held up. Yeah. He definitely held up. He definitely seems like a type of guy that has that range and versatility to kind of play multiple positions. Look at that man. Look at that corn boy, man. Look at that. How could you not want that on your
He's got an America tattoo.
Oh, that's right.
This guy is a Bill. This guy
that is a process man through and through.
Oh no.
Now, our Steve Mathis from the Air Raid Hour very much is a Riley Moss enjoyer. In fact, he even put a video of one of his reps during one-on-ones on Twitter and kind of got roasted a little bit for calling him the next Micah Hyde. But I do think Riley there, I would be super intrigued if the Bills drafted him. He's one of those guys that seems like a kind of surefire day 2 type of guy. Whether the Bills decide to pick that high on him, helpful, but you never know. You never know. And I'm gonna switch the order up a little bit here. I'm gonna talk about the other DB from Iowa, and that is Kayvon Merriweather, who, again, just like Riley Moss, great week of practice, definitely a safety type. Just looked super smart, super comfortable, has the range and the athleticism that you want. I mean, this is sort of what you get with Iowa guys, right? They're guys who are built to play in the NFL. And that's, I think, what Kayvon Merriweather looked like to me. He just looked super solid all week. We're going to move to Sidney Brown next. And we mentioned his twin brother earlier in this podcast, Chase Brown. Both. Yeah, it was a little. We were all just kind of like, Brown. Is that the other? Does he play? Does he play DB too? And we're like, no, that's definitely a different guy. And we're like, are they related? Like, what are the odds that there's 2 guys named Brown from Illinois that are, in the same? There you go, identical twin.
And they look the same.
and Sidney Brown's interesting because I don't think he necessarily had. Well, no. Let me change course here. He had a good week of practice, but the biggest question with Sidney Brown is, where do you play him? Because he's well built, but he doesn't seem like he's overly quick or fast. So do you feel comfortable with him at safety? Maybe, maybe not. But if you move him to linebacker, he's like 2 something, like maybe 210. Somebody I want to have play linebacker?
No.
So he's kind of this classic sort of Steve Keim tweener where it's like, where do you end up playing him? And, for the most part, he needs to be one place or the other, and that's probably not going to work out. So I'm intrigued by Sidney Brown. I just don't know where he's going to fit in the NFL. Be a very interesting player to watch. Lastly, for the DBs is Anthony Prohaska's dude. And you're going to have to get used to hearing this name from him throughout the draft process. And that is Chris Smith from Georgia. And let me tell you something. There's a reason for this. It's because Chris Smith is a good freaking player. My gosh. I mean, he's got that range, that versatility that you want. He's got the instincts. the intelligence. Prohaska actually interviewed him a little bit. Go to his Twitter and go find that interview. I'm telling you, you're gonna have a hard time not wanting this dude. And especially for a team whose outlook at safety is long-term not great at the moment. Jordan Poyer likely out. Micah Hyde, and he's 30-something. We don't know, and he's going to be in his last year of his contract, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows if he's going to come back, and if he does, how well he's. Obviously, you have DeMar Hamlin, and whatever happens with him happens. You have Dean Marlowe, if you want, but
I don't.
So, yeah, I think that it is interesting because one of the few things that the Bills did, in pretty much the only thing that they did in terms of coaching staff changes, was fire Salgado, their safeties coach, and bring in somebody new, whose name escapes me. Eric did a whole thread about that.
Yeah.
And actually a very interesting thread, and something worth noting because this was the DBs or safeties coach in Houston last year, and Houston had Jalen Petrie as a rookie last year, who had a great year in terms of like receptions, was somebody that a lot of people liked coming out of Baylor, but also missed like a lot of tackles. But that's not necessarily something that is unknown to the Buffalo defense. So I think with somebody like Chris Smith, who has sort of that same ability that a tree has, it would be interesting to see if maybe they're just bringing in this new safeties coach to actually develop somebody who is going to eventually take over as one of the safeties moving forward. That again, this is all very speculative, and I'm sure the Bills will bring in a veteran safety just to kind of, keep if they can, because they're not a team that wants to rely too much on their rookies. But Chris Smith is definitely going to be one of those guys that I think somebody in that Bills scouting room is going to pound the table for. And if they don't, then Anthony Prohaska will. So.
It's Joe Dana.
That's right. Yeah.
He is the new Bills safety coach. Is Chris Smith the best Georgia DB in this draft?
Maybe. Obviously, there's,
Keely Ringo slander.
Talk about Keely Ringo. This is not slander about Keely Ringo. Well, it might be a little bit slanderous. But the thing with Keely Ringo, right, is like, from what I've heard, I've not watched a whole lot of Keely Ringo. So feel free to go and judge yourselves. But Keely has definitely benefited a lot from Georgia's strong defensive line play. Now you might be thinking, David, you idiot, you just talked about Chris Smith. How does he not benefit from that as well? And certainly you might be right about that. But the difference, I think, between somebody like Chris Smith and Keely Ringo is there's times where Keely Ringo is kind of winning because of the defensive line, not necessarily just being put in a good position because of the defensive line. So there's times where Keely Ringo is not in the best position to make plays, at least from what I've heard. Again, other people can go and look and make their judgments for themselves, and I'm not saying Keely Ringo is going to be a bad player or anything like that or whatever. But Chris Smith is a very good player, and that was evident throughout this whole week of practice. So
we're going to move on now to the last position group and the last player, punter, Bryce Behringer.
Bryce Behringer from Michigan State. I also had a chance to interview him, talking about the sort of punting legacy that Michigan State has. There was a punter there about 10 years ago named Mike Sadler, who was this really funny personality. I don't know if you're familiar with Bo Pelini when he was the head coach at Nebraska, and his cat that he brought onto the field during the spring game once. So after that spring game, when Michigan State played Nebraska, Mike Sadler had a great punt that landed inside like the 5. And to celebrate, he like petted a fake cat in his arms. Mike Sadler, just personalities people loved. Unfortunately, died a couple of years after he graduated from Michigan State in a car accident. But as somebody that Bryce Behringer worked with, a lot of punters in that sort of Big Ten Midwest region, worked with at various like punting camps and whatnot. Somebody that a lot of people loved. Behringer, to his own credit, a really good punter and was absolutely blasting kicks, especially on that first day. But he was phenomenal as just punting and getting those kicks off throughout the week. And the Bills obviously have like a perfectly decent option in Sam Martin right now at punter. And I'm sure people would just be super stoked to draft a punter for the second year in a row, especially given how the last
I'm looking forward to it.
Which maybe I need to do some background checks on Bryce Behringer, just to be sure. But he's somebody that, at least from an on-field perspective, is somebody worth keeping an eye on. I don't. Very surprised if the Bills had 2 straight years where they drafted a punter. But if Bryce Behringer somehow makes it to undrafted free agency, I could see them bringing him in and competing for that spot with Sam Martin. So
it is now time for the segment that everyone has been looking forward to. David has done I'm dying. COVID's back. David has done an expert job over the last hour and 11 minutes breaking down the players that stood out to him at the Senior Bowl. And now he is going to identify the one player out of all that he's talked about, right? He said a few who he thinks could be fits with the Buffalo Bills. He's now going to tell you, our loyal viewers, who the one player who he feels the Buffalo Bills need to draft is. David, who is that player?
The one player. I only get one?
You only get one. Then you can have honorable mentions, but you can only say one for sure.
I am probably going to go with Chris Smith from Georgia.
Wow.
Because
Anthony Prohaska, eat your heart out.
Because I think this is one of those picks that helps you right now and in the future.
Okay.
Which I think is very rare. And I think it's going to allow them, if they so choose, to do a couple of different things defensively in terms of how they play coverage. And I think that would be very necessary because this defense is just kind of stale at times.
A little bit.
It's a little bit. And I think that somebody like Chris Smith working with guys like Mike Hyde, and Teron Johnson, the way they decide to sort of work those guys around, it could be interesting. Have something. There's guys like Christian Benford, who we've talked about, maybe moving to safety. Obviously, you still have Trent White and Kyer Elam and Dane Jackson at corner. And suddenly, you have a very, very deep corner group with the Bills. And if that's the case, then it is kind of worth seeing if Christian Benford can make the transition to safety. You don't rely on a corner transitioning to safety and somebody coming off of neck fusion surgery to be your guys. So I think that they do sign some sort of veteran, whoever that may be, and I think they really want to just say, get somebody that they feel super confident in for the future of this team at defensive back and at safety. I think Chris Smith could be that guy.
There you have it. Honorable mentions. Just, one more maybe where you're just like,
more?
He can't be the one, but, I also would like this guy as well.
Probably John Michael Schmitz.
Okay. Because that makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah. Again, one of those guys who can help you right now and help you in the future.
It's now time for everyone's favorite segment. Are you ready, David?
I'm
It's true or rubbish.
Let's see the true or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. This is the segment where I give David a number of true or false statements relating largely to the Buffalo Bills, sometimes just about football in general. Yeah, I am going to audible. I am going to add one as well. But
All right, go for it.
And we're going to, and then he tells me whether or not they are true or rubbish. So we will start with the Bills related ones. So we talked a lot about offensive linemen on this show, David. That's kind of the position that you focused on while you were at the Senior Bowl. So we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills offensive line. True or rubbish? The Spencer Brown experiment is over.
I'm going with rubbish.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
Here's the thing. Spencer Brown did not play his best football last year. He was dealing with an injury that he had surgery. He had back surgery, right? It kept him out of training camp. He kind of just looked stiff all year. It looked like really progressed in terms of his technique for the most part. That being said, Spencer Brown's base salary for this year is just over $1 million. Why would you get rid of that? His cap number is like 1.3 million. I'm
not saying cut him. I just mean he will not start.
I mean, maybe he won't start. Maybe. I think you need to for sure. But if he starts, it's because he actually won the job. And that would make me feel more confident in him. But I don't think that it's just over and done with. And maybe I'm just banking a little too much on his elite level athletic ability.
Right. Which he definitely has.
He definitely has that. But I'm much more willing to just like let the dude compete and see what you can get with this. Because I mean, worst case scenario, you're paying 1.3 million for a backup right tackle. So be it.
I'm of two minds on this. I think it's true that he doesn't start. And I don't know if Spencer Brown ever plays significant snaps for the Buffalo Bills, barring injury again. I think it's rubbish in that Brandon Beane seems like so, I guess, haunted. He is so haunted by the Wyatt Teller fiasco that he is not going to give up on an offensive lineman until he absolutely has to again. He is going to give these dudes every opportunity that they can before he trades them or moves on from them, just because he doesn't want another Wyatt Teller situation. Again, you saw what he did with Cody Ford, right? Arguably gave Cody Ford too many opportunities to earn a job just because he didn't want to make the same mistake twice. So
now that being said, he gave Cody Ford a lot of chances. Up trade, and maybe Spencer Brown is one of those guys who's on the trade block in the offseason. Could be.
It could
if there's something the NFL is always desperate for, it's athletic offensive linemen, whether they're good or not.
He's still young. And like at this point, I don't want to give up on Spencer Brown either, but just like if they do, right? Imagine they get like a 5th round pick for Spencer Brown. It's like you spent a 3rd on him 2 years ago, and then you're swapping him for a 5th. There's no upside in getting rid of Spencer Brown right now. That being said, I also don't know if he's ever going to develop into anything. I don't think he is.
Fair.
True or rubbish?
Yep.
The Buffalo Bills are going to draft a running back on day 2 yet again.
For my own sanity, I'm going to say rubbish.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
But it could happen.
I'm not saying it can't happen. But my gosh, can we not do this again? James Cook was a good player. James Cook is a good player. I feel very confident in James Cook as a running back moving forward. Can we just have a day 2 that doesn't involve some weird ass picks? Whether that's Terrell Boogie Basham or James Cook as another running back. It's just like, can we just relax? Can we just have some normal day 2 pick? Whoever that might be.
I still love Terrell Bernard because it's still as perplexing today as it was when the pick was made. Like
Yes,
at
it
the
is.
time, I couldn't talk myself into it. I still can't talk myself into it right now. I don't necessarily know why he's here, what his long-term role is. Like he's intriguing. I'm intrigued by his athleticism and by him as a player, but just like, look, Matt Milano is an all-pro. That's the role he would take, and you have a relatively young all-pro locked in for the next however many years. Terrell Bernard is not playing middle linebacker in the event that you do lose Tremaine Edmonds. Weird pick. Dave Aranda, must have gotten in someone's ear. Okay. This is where I'm doing an audible. Are you ready, David?
Okay. Let's do it.
True or rubbish? Tom Brady is done playing football.
You're going to need to repeat that.
True or rubbish? Tom Brady is done playing football.
Oh, rubbish.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
Very confident.
There is God's green earth that I'm going to believe Tom Brady is not retired until like 2025. Really until he takes like that Fox job. I mean, seriously. He could come back in the middle of the season, and I'd be like, yeah, I buy that.
I did not expect him to be posting thirst traps less than a week after retiring. That is not something I saw Tom Brady getting into, but
Tom Brady OnlyFans when?
Probably right now. Maybe that's the breaking news that happened when we were on the podcast. Tom Brady launched his OnlyFans. All right. True or rubbish? Mobile, Alabama is a nice town.
I'm going to say push.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
So, on the one hand, Mobile, Alabama has some absolutely amazing food. Already talked about the breakfast spot that the Cover One crew and Brian Dayball frequented every single day. We went to a barbecue place that was unbelievably good. We went to a which was believably good. Good food all week long. Also, Mobile, Alabama is one of the creepiest towns I've ever been in. The neighborhood that we were in, that we set up our house in, has these live oaks, which are massive, long-hanging trees that block a lot of sunlight. And not only that, they're old, and the roots are just like up and coming out of the ground, and thus destroying the sidewalks that they're underneath.
Very nice.
Very creepy vibe. Not to mention, there was such dense fog on Monday that it prevented AJ from landing. There was a pretty dense fog kind of throughout most of the week. Just dark, gray, overcast. And let me tell you something. There's some very nice people that live and are from Mobile, Alabama. There's also some really weird ass people from Mobile, Alabama. Just it felt like every other Uber driver we had just gave off the wrong vibes, man. Just the wrong vibes.
So it's that Southern hospitality, man. And you didn't go to a Waffle House. Well, you live within striking range of a Waffle House, I would imagine,
yes,
right? Okay, so it's not special to you.
No, it's not.
Sad. David, this is going to sound to you, I may have said this on the podcast before, I don't even know, but this is not going to come as a surprise to you or to anyone who watches the podcast. I love the Waffle House. I have made special trips to my nearest Waffle House, which is roughly 4 hours away, for nothing else. I have gone to Waffle House and come back. That is how much I love the Waffle House. Are
you okay, Kyle?
No, I'm not. Look, capitalism is the best because I love the fact that whenever I want one, right? Like I can't go to Waffle House right now, but in theory, if I could, right? In theory, I could go to Waffle House and have an affordable, delicious waffle for very cheap and it's waiting there for me in theory,
Yeah.
and that's why I love the Waffle House. And that's all I have to say about the Waffle House. I wish I were there right now. True or rubbish? The Pro Bowl structure isn't bad, actually.
Rubbish.
That is
all
rubbish.
The
All
way.
after all, it was all
Wow.
rubbish.
Wow.
That sounded like I have a stronger opinion.
Yeah, it did.
Or a more detailed opinion. The fact of the matter is, I just cannot care about the Pro Bowl at this point. I don't care what they
Okay.
do. Don't care if it's a real game where you give like 30% effort. I don't care if it's flag football and with a bunch of other side events. I just don't care.
That's fair. That's very fair. I also didn't watch it, so I have no idea if it's good or not. But I saw a lot of funny Twitter stuff out of it. So good. I saw Stephon Diggs, being a menace as he so often is. Tweeting about following the script and doing whatever he was doing with those cheerleaders. Hilarious bit. But yeah, does that wrap up the show? I think we had a good show today, Senior Bowl talk. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. There's a subscribe button somewhere under me. Make sure to check out Cover One on all social medias. It's at some variation of Cover One. Make sure to check out cover1.football. Consider subscribing to One Pass. Again, $57 a month. I believe you get exclusive in-depth breakdowns and also access to the Cover One Premium Slack, where you can talk to a bunch of Bills fans all the time about a number of topics, including the Buffalo Bills. And also you can talk to us sometimes. Make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy and BetUS. Make sure to check out, again, next week we're leaking the script. We're leaking the Buffalo Bills off-season script. So make sure to tune in for that one next Monday night, where you will find David and I. David, where can the people find you until then?
You all can find me on Twitter at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. Kyle, where can the people find you?
They can find me at my home and also at Kyle Silagyi on Twitter. You can't find me at Waffle House, sadly, because we don't have a Waffle House in Buffalo, New York. We have sub-zero temperatures and earthquakes, apparently. Awful stuff, man. Like, why can't we have a Waffle House?
Talk to the people at the top.
That's what we're going to do until Air Raid Hour comes on the air. We're spending the next 30 minutes. You can go. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. I am spending the next 30 minutes getting to the top of Waffle House corporate to understand why they do not have a Buffalo, New York location. I'll probably just do that on my own time. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you next week. Okay. Bye-bye.